called the Apache license. If you want to get that license, you must guarantee that every single conversation about the project is in the public forum. If 3 people who happen to be co-located go and want to get a license, they cannot get the license. Because there's even the chance you're co-located, you're likely to talk. You won't get the license. So there's a strong norm about that. And so, yeah, we might be missing some, but on the other hand, we may not, because of the norms of open source. Okay, so that was all about closure. Now, that's the first of the 3. The second of the 3 is bridging. Now here, for core bridging, as you can see, basically no significant relationship. One inverted view, very weak, almost didn't show up. So basically this is saying core bridging doesn't matter. It's not important for success. For administrator bridging, similar result. We see 3 of the 4 were non-significant. So we're saying that this doesn't matter either, although we do recognize there was one significant inverted U on code commits. So what do we think of that? Well, how could that be? In teams, bridging is important. Why not here? Well, we think in open source, the reason it may not be is that there's a great deal of transparency in the environment. And so it might not be necessary to have bridging ties. If you're on a team in an organization, you want to find out what's going on in other teams, you typically have to know people in the other team. It's not all out there on a website somewhere. But in an open source community, you look at on SourceForge, for example, all the records of the project are open, the source code's there, the public forums are there, all the developer names are there, even sometimes their backgrounds. You have search engines that let you search and find the project you want. So basically, you can sit on your screen and you can get a great deal of that outside information without the need to have a bridging tie to anybody, as opposed to the team in the organizational world, which is more opaque, where you do need it. So we think that may be why we're seeing that it's not really important. We do see the one inverted U, and that, so there may be some benefits, at least in terms of administrators and the code commits outcome. But again, you do have an inverted U, so it says maybe at some point the bridging ties become burdensome to the administrator. But again, only one of the 8, so it seemed like a limited result. Now here we do recognize the membership ties. We use them as a proxy for conversational ties. Maybe that's not a valid assumption, and that would be for future research. We also recognize that we only use SourceForge as our research setting, and it's possible that other kind of platforms don't have the same kind of transparency that SourceForge does. Although from what we know, with maybe the exception of the efficiency of the search engine, they probably do. Generally, open source platforms are open. So now, the last of the 3, the leader centrality results. Again, we thought we'd see an inverted U. But we do get a mixed bag. Of the 4 possibilities, 2 of them have no relationship. But for software releases, we get actually a fairly strong positive result. And for page views, we get a U-shaped result. So how do we look at that? Well, we think both of those are spurious. I mean, the U-shape is the same type of thing. It's on page views, which is the same variable we saw with core density. So again, we think we're looking at that kind of qualitatively different kind of subset of communities. But in the case of software releases, if you look at it, if centrality was important to output, why is it not affecting code commits? Why is that no relationship? And then why is it so strong here on software releases? You would expect these to be more correlated. So what we think is happening is, it turns out that the decision to make a software release is really up to the administrator. And literally, an administrator could say every day, let's do another release. I mean, there's no reason why they couldn't. Now, it might be a good idea, but in any event, because that is kind of a style issue, we suspect that there are administrators who just have this high propensity to release. They just like to release all the time, and any maybe little change gets made into another version of the software. And what would happen in that case, if that's true, then those who are releasing so often, in a sense, they're generating their own centrality, because if you release a lot, you're going to tend to cause questions about the new release, and who are they going to be directed to? To you, the one who released it. So there's that centrality. So basically what we're thinking is that it's not centrality that causes a lot of releases. It's a lot of releases that causes centrality. So it's a case of a reverse kind of a causality here. And we think that's a lot more a lot more plausible explanation than the other way. So if that and that are really spurious, then we're back to saying that leader centrality doesn't really matter. And why would that be? Well, if you look at open source administrators, they generally have a low-key role compared to, say, team leaders. Team leaders are planners, schedulers, negotiators. They involved a great deal in the team. Whereas in an open source community, the most important thing, I guess, the administrator does is the gatekeeper for that source code repository. But otherwise, all the rest of this activity is pretty much independent. So you can imagine then in that situation why leader centrality might not be important. Again, we recognize conversational ties may not be captured, but we think we probably are capturing them based on open source norms. So, getting back to the research objectives then, this is just repeating one of the earlier slides. We feel we have addressed the success mystery. We've shown that the kinds of social network structures that are normative are those that have low levels of group closure, to some extent low levels of core closure. But otherwise, bridging and leader centrality don't seem to matter. They don't seem to be important conditions of success. So that's addressing the success mystery. But